Apparently, a country that has $887 billion in credit card debt, $195 billion in medical debt, $1.6 trillion in student loan debt, 30 million people without health insurance, 500,000 people homeless on the streets, 40,000 of which are veterans of its military forces, can afford to leave behind $7 billion worth of weapons in Afghanistan after the catastrophic withdrawal that happened there recently. And this country, of course, is the United States of America. I'm Stuart Hooper, a lecturer in political science and PhD researcher. Be sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel, where we look at international affairs from a critical angle instead of an ideological prison. So we're not committed to the left or the right on this channel. We're committed to the truth and to fact. And the fact in this case is that this has to at least be deemed misappropriation of government funds, if not outright theft of the people's money, which is ultimately what this is, because this new report is absolutely devastating. People should be up in arms about this, and I'm kind of confused as to why there are not mass protests in the streets of the United States demanding an end to what is essentially a blank check to the military-industrial complex. This is completely out of control, and this has to change. And here's the article, and the most important quote. The State Department Inspector General said, "The Department of Defense estimated that $7.12 billion worth of American-funded aircraft, vehicles, weapons, munitions, and other equipment were still in Afghan government inventories at the time of the Taliban takeover." Now, there was a very famous sociologist, political scientist, historian called Charles Tilly, who wrote a really important piece called War Making and State Making as Organized Crime. And when you look at the numbers that were involved in the war on terror, the amounts of money that were spent, that were dumped into the military-industrial complex, you really do have to equate this with organized crime, because it's completely out of control. And Tilly said, since governments themselves commonly simulate, stimulate, or even fabricate threats of external war, and since the repressive and extractive activities of governments often constitute the latest current threats to the livelihoods of their own citizens, many governments operate in essentially the same way as racketeers. And Tilly agreed with one of my first points in this clip. He said that if there is mass resistance to this sort of thing, to writing blank checks to go to war with foreign nations, to create untold devastation at home and abroad, mass resistance can actually rein this in. So where is it? That's my real question. Because in Afghanistan alone, this goes far beyond $7 billion worth of weapons. We're talking about, in total, $2.26 trillion that was spent on this catastrophe in Afghanistan. And as we've now seen with the chaos and devastation and humanitarian nightmare that Afghanistan has descended into after 2 decades and $2.26 trillion, it's really accurate to say that was nothing but a boondoggle. This was a complete scam, a complete waste of time that has benefited absolutely nobody except those in the military-industrial complex. Those elites, those transnational techno-military elites that really control not only American but Western foreign policy as a whole. But if you go to NATO's website, the transnational techno-military institution, which is responsible for the implementation of this 2-decade-long disaster, well, they tell us that NATO allies went into Afghanistan after the 9/11 terror attacks on the United States to ensure that the country would not again become a safe haven for international terrorists to attack NATO member countries. Over the last 2 decades, there have been no terrorist attacks on Allied soil from Afghanistan. So despite everything that's gone on, despite what we can see with our own eyes, NATO is still trying to spin this as a victory. This is absolutely ridiculous, and that is one of the most disingenuous statements I think I've ever seen on a government website. And now, they're trying to do this all over again with Ukraine. How do you stop this? You call your congressman, you call your member of parliament, you make it known. They are not getting your vote ever again to conduct any more foreign policy militarism while our own countries are quite literally falling apart at the seams. Bridges are collapsing in the United States. This is not a joke. Please subscribe if you are new to the channel, where I will continue to push a message which speaks out against this military-industrial complex. Please share this video everywhere you possibly can. Get this message out to more people that absolutely need to hear it. And you can also follow me on other social media channels at the links below. Thank you all for your attention, and I'll be back with more videos in the coming week.